In October 2022, the United States Air Force confirmed the E-4B Nightwatch would continue flying, despite maintenance costs exceeding hundreds of millions annually. The replacement program was delayed into the 2030s. The aircraft first flew in 1973. Air Force Global Strike Command budget documents revealed the truth, that this was not about nostalgia or reliability. Regulatory traps, survivability requirements no modern aircraft could meet, and industrial collapse had made the Cold War stopgap irreplaceable. The following year, 1974, the first E-4A entered service under Secretary of Defense James Schlesinger, the same year Nixon resigned, and just months after the Yom Kippur War nearly escalated to a nuclear exchange. The Boeing 747-200B platform offered the range and payload for an airborne command post that could survive a Soviet first strike. Department of Defense planning documents treated it as a bridge solution. No one specified an end date. No one documented what would replace it. The temporary solution quietly became indispensable precisely because it worked. The early 1980s saw the fleet expand to 4 aircraft during President Reagan's massive military buildup. In 1983, NATO's Able Archer exercise brought the world closer to nuclear war than at any time since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Soviet leadership genuinely believed a first strike was coming. The E-4B existed precisely for scenarios like this. Boeing defense executives understood there were no competing American wide-body manufacturers. The certification stamp granted to the original design became a strategic asset. Every modification built upon that certification. Replicating it would require years and billions of dollars. The production line making the E-4 possible was already winding down. Soon, the industrial capability to build an identical replacement would no longer exist. In 1994, the last E-4B was delivered. The Soviet Union had collapsed 3 years earlier. The peace dividend dominated Washington, and no one was funding replacements for aircraft built to fight a war that had apparently ended. FAA military certification liaisons had processed exemption after exemption. The aircraft operated under rules civilian airliners could never satisfy. Each exemption seemed reasonable in isolation, but exemptions compounded. The regulatory comfort zone had quietly become a wall preventing replacement. Then came September 11th, 2001. As smoke rose from the Pentagon, news cameras captured something unusual circling Washington. A white Boeing 747 with a distinctive hump. The E-4B had launched, ready to serve as an airborne command post if the attacks escalated. For most Americans, this was the first time they ever saw the Doomsday Plane. The aircraft designed for Soviet nuclear war had just proven its relevance in an entirely different threat environment. 5 years later, Air Force acquisition officials initiated serious replacement studies. Boeing 767 and 777 platforms appeared in white papers. But Iraq and Afghanistan war budgets dominated priorities. The F-35 program was already consuming billions and generating headlines about delays and overruns. No one wanted another troubled procurement. The E-4B still flew. Replacement could wait. The decision to delay was never formally announced. It emerged from budget allocations and competing priorities. Delay became policy through inaction, each year making replacement slightly more difficult. The certification landscape had transformed by 2012. After 9/11, FAA advisory circulars mandated EMP hardening and cybersecurity standards that did not exist in 1974. Any new aircraft would need to demonstrate survivability against threats the original designers never anticipated. The E-4B met none of these standards as written. It did not need to. Certification documents from 1974 remained valid. Old planes were grandfathered. New ones were not. In 2017, Boeing announced the end of 747 production. Chief Executive Officer Dennis Muilenburg's earnings calls confirmed what planners feared: the production line was closing. Moving to a 777 or 787 platform would require reinventing every modification from scratch. New shielding, new antennas, new certifications. The industrial base collapse meant replacement now required fundamental engineering redevelopment. The aircraft, supposed to be temporary, had outlasted the factory that built it. 2 years later, Air Force Inspector General audits revealed per aircraft sustainment costs exceeding $100 million annually. Government Accountability Office reports documented parts obsolescence and specialized procedures existing nowhere else in the inventory. 4 aircraft were consuming over $400 million yearly, yet replacement estimates exceeded $10 billion, with timelines stretching into the 2030s. Sustaining aging aircraft remained cheaper than replacement. The cost explosion had arrived, but it was still the least expensive option. Declassified Air Force summaries from 2020 explained the irreplaceability of the E-4B. Electromagnetic pulse hardening required analog backup systems that digital aircraft had eliminated. Trailing wire antennas demanded structural modifications incompatible with composite airframes. Modern digital jets failed survivability tests. The E-4B passed precisely because it was old. Vacuum tubes and analog circuits were advantages, not obsolescence. Modernization had become the enemy of nuclear survivability. The following year, the Survivable Airborne Operations Center program launched under Secretary Frank Kendall. Congressional testimony revealed the Boeing 747-8 candidate had been abandoned. The production line was closed. No civilian certified platform met survivability requirements. The program pivoted to a clean sheet approach. The old jet won by default, not because it was best, but because it already existed and held certifications no new aircraft could obtain. Through 2022, logistics burdens intensified beyond public visibility. Parts were cannibalized from retired aircraft. Training pipelines depended on technicians approaching retirement. Internal documents described knowledge extinction risk. Expertise existed in the heads of aging specialists with no successors. Younger maintainers trained on digital systems found analog architecture unfamiliar. The human capital sustaining the aircraft was as fragile as its supply chain. Come 2023, capacity mathematics became unavoidable. Only 4 operational aircraft existed worldwide. Congressional hearings documented what this meant. A single unscheduled maintenance event could ground national command redundancy. Cold War planning assumed larger fleets and shorter timelines. The current fleet operated at minimum viable capacity, with no reserve, no production capability, and no near-term replacement. No margin remained. Defense media exposure brought the E-4B into public debate. Senate Armed Services Committee members questioned whether nuclear command relied on museum pieces, but no alternative meets survivability law. Regulations designed to ensure resilience had created a certification fortress only the existing aircraft could occupy. The aircraft critics mocked remained the only platform that could legally perform the mission. Now, with war in Ukraine and rising tensions with China, nuclear deterrence matters more than at any time since the Cold War. Projections show billions of dollars required through 2035 for life extension. Boeing remains locked in as sole viable integrator. The E-4B has joined another Cold War relic in a club no one wanted. Aircraft the Air Force cannot replace. The B-52 bomber first flew in 1952 and will serve into the 2050s. The pattern is the same: regulatory lock-in, industrial base collapse, and modifications too expensive to replicate. At Offutt Air Force Base, an E-4B sits on the tarmac, its distinctive hump marking it as a relic of another era. The aircraft, supposed to be temporary, has outlasted its production line, its regulatory framework, and every replacement attempt. The safest aircraft is the one regulators can no longer build.